This podcast is sponsored by Logos Bible Software. If you've been longing for the tools to take your Bible study deeper, you need to try out Logos. I've been personally using Logos for over a decade now for both my devotional and pastoral study. Right now, Logos has partnered with the Kingdom Dreamers to bring you exclusive savings. Check out at logos.com/Kingdom Dreamer or click the link in the show notes for our exclusive offer.
As I have a dream, and staggered by the winds of police brutality, you have been the veterans of creative suffering.
The ballot or the bullet
is to either ignore them or to deny them without giving details.
And we stand together to win the war.
One small step for man. Yes, we can. Can we all get along?
It's crazy out here. Welcome in to the Wild Wild World. Season 3, we have returned from our long hiatus of rest/not rest.
We're back.
We are back. This is the podcast of conscious Christian conversation about the chaos in the cosmos. Cuz, what you think? How's that for a tagline?
I like that though, cuz. Actually, let me not play, you know what I mean?
But welcome in.
Man from the jump.
Right, we'll chill a little bit, but yeah. This is the Wild Wild World Show, Season 3, a Kingdom Dreamer podcast where we fight to reunite righteousness and justice. We've been building up to this season, and we're excited to be back. Kellen, how you feeling with the return?
I'm feeling lovely. I'm feeling wondrous. I'm feeling awesome. Feeling fantastical. I'm ready to roll, Will. I feel like we ain't been here enough. We ain't brought the people enough content. Me and you we just ain't had the opportunity to chop it up enough about these things that's going on out here in the zeitgeist. So I'm just ready to. I'm ready. I'm ready to roll. I ain't even had no coffee or nothing, but I'm energetic. Let's do this.
It's all this stuff is pent up. So you guys we're gonna have a good season. Make sure you follow Kellen. He just crossed 100 Twitter followers.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I got
more followers than tweets.
R.
Let's get it.
Exactly. He's going somewhere in the Twitter world. Follow him. Follow me at William R. Horn, HORNE, and follow the Kingdom Dreamers at Kingdom X Dreams. We also have a Patreon page now, so you can support the movement because we're about to do big things. Yep. You see, we even got the matching headgear on.
Mm-hmm.
There's good merch out there. Check it out.
Hey,
in the
this is
store.
the best KD out there. You ain't gonna find no KD more proficient than us. None.
Nope. None of the cupcake stuff you've seen from the other KD. None of that.
None of that. So you can check us out, patreon.com/Kingdom Dreamers. Check the merch out in the store. We also have had monthly contests. And we had a monthly contest this last March to win all the merch, including the snapback, 2 T-shirts. We need a cha-ching drop or Price is Right drop or something like that right there.
Right. We need to add that in. Cha-ching. A lot of merch. And congratulations, Donna from Florida, a new listener. She won all the merch, sending it to
congratulations, Donna.
South Place. Congrats. But
congrats, Donna. You the man, Donna. We appreciate you. Rock that gear proudly, Donna. Represent, Donna. We with you. Thank you.
But anyway, be looking for the April giveaway. It's going to be coming towards the end of the month. So, Kellen, I hear people are saying things about us, man.
Shot was that?
Ah, you like that, huh?
Yeah.
They are?
They are.
They are. Yes, they are. Look, so my man, every once in a while, people go ahead and drop some reviews for us on some of these different services, podcast sites and whatnot. So we have an Apple review that I want to just read real quick from my man Drinwi. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's DRINWI. I probably shouldn't spell it out. That's not good podcasting, but still, I didn't want to mispronounce his handle or whatever. But what my man says about us is open, authentic, and humorous. Well, thank you. It says, Will and Kellen are not afraid to address any issue, explore today's controversial events, or openly discuss thought-provoking topics. Their openness, humor, and authenticity keep me coming back. Well, thank you. And Will, you didn't write that yourself, did you?
I did not, because I don't know who Derwin. I don't even know how to say it, so how could I have done it?
Yeah, look, I didn't write it. I know my mama didn't write it, so we appreciate it. We thank you very much. That makes me feel good.
But your mama is a big fan, so shout out to Kellen's mom. We love you. We appreciate your support.
Always appreciate you, Mama. You know, she always sharing our stuff. Thanks, Mom. Appreciate you, my dude. But now we want y'all mama to support us as well, and you as well. So we want all the mamas in the game with us. So that's the next step. But we appreciate the review. So please make sure if you're listening to this right now, do us a solid. Go ahead and just rate, review the podcast. You know, you can do it now or you can wait till after you finish listening. Either way works for us. But you know, if you give us 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever you feel we deserve, you know, we okay with that. And if you could drop us a little review, that's much appreciated. From time to time, we're going to share some reviews that we get here with y'all. So please keep that coming. And those reviews and those ratings, as Will tell you, really do actually help our profile on these different sites, whether it's Apple, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, any of the podcast platforms that we're in. It actually does help, and it helps us get a little bit more exposure. So we appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks for the love, but y'all know what time it is. It's time for it. It's crazy out here.
Man, crazy out here, man.
Bringing back the hot takes on the news, but we're going to do it, you know, quick style today.
Yeah, rapid fire.
Rapid fire. It's crazy out here because we've been gone so long. And we're literally living in the craziest times of my entire lifetime. I don't know if it's the craziest as yours, probably the craziest as Kellen's. Maybe
as an American, yes, it is. Yeah.
It's been wild. So, rapid fire. Kellen, what is the first thing that comes on your news feed here?
Well, a tiger caught the Rona.
What?
A tiger caught the Rona.
I really didn't see this, so I don't even know what's happening.
Oh, you didn't? Look, it came across the news feed a few days back. Now, I haven't gone back and checked. So, you know, maybe this was a hoax. I don't know. And if it was, then I'm boo-boo the fool. But there was an article that the tiger then tested positive for the Rona. And you know, well, Will knows that right now tigers are a big part of my life. And we ain't even going to get into it more than that. Tigers might be a big part of your life as well. If you've been watching the series, we ain't going to talk about it right now. I'm trying to get Will on board. So hopefully next week we'll talk about it.
Maybe next week.
Maybe next week. But a tiger that somehow caught the Rona. I don't really even have anything else to say about it. I don't really know where to go with that. I don't have a hot take on it, but a tiger caught the Rona.
So coronavirus is getting crazy. It's even maybe striking the animal kingdom. Let me give you the next news feed. Bernie Sanders today, the day we're recording, drops out the presidential race, making it Biden versus Trump, just as I know everybody always hoped for.
Oh, we all saw it coming.
Yeah, well, we all saw it coming.
There's a lot of millennials out here real sad. A lot of far left folks real sad. That's not me making fun of the far left folks, because you know we ain't far right and nothing like that. But you know, a lot of people very sad, very hopeful, because they had their hopes pinned on Bernie to, you know, I guess make America a better place and be a monarch somehow, and turn the entire system upside down. Just like people had hope that Obama would do the same thing, and some people on the other side of the aisle had hope that Trump would do the same thing. So, yeah, I don't always understand why we get so wrapped up in these individual presidential candidates who are, you know, bound by law in a lot of areas. But hey, a lot of folks is upset right now. But you know, hey, like you said, we got Biden versus Trump coming up.
Yep. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of conversations about that. Yeah, I don't have anything to say, man. It is what it is. It is what it is.
Can you tell we're somewhat indifferent politically, right?
Yeah, it's like whatever, man. It is what it is. There'll be more conversations.
I'm sure we'll talk about it from time to time. But as of right now, I don't care.
There you go. That's the news. We don't care.
Moving on to something I do care about.
Yes.
Well, that's stimuli. The stimulus package got approved. So money is coming y'all way. Unless you've been like a deadbeat dad and you owe some money in child support, then you ain't getting none. But for most folks, that stimulus package is coming. $1,200 a person, $500 for a dependent. There's small business loans out here dropping. There's some, you know, other bailouts as we could expect to big business. But Will, what's the first thing you're gonna do with your stimulus check? Tell the people, tell everybody what you're gonna do with it. What you gonna pay?
I'll be straight.
Give us the account number too if you're gonna pay a bill. We all want to know.
Yeah, right. Let me give you the bank account. So it's $1,200 per person, so that means I'm getting $2,400. And I just had a kid.
You got a dependent now, Will. You forgot. Oh, okay, I was about to say you forgot. Oh, it doesn't.
I didn't forget.
Count.
It doesn't count because I'm 2019. Yeah. So I don't get that little $500 bonus. So I'm only getting $2,400. So be straight. I owe some taxes from 2019. So I'm gonna pay part of my taxes. I gotta take care of that. And then I'm gonna stock that mug in savings, man. I'm gonna play smart out here. Yep. Financially wise.
Huh? What happened?
Exactly. What you gonna do, Kellen?
I'm about to buy a boat. We on a boat. We on a. No.
Can you get a boat for $2,400?
About to spend that money like it's my first NBA check.
There you go. Get a chain and a house for your mama. Yep.
Yeah, buddy. Look, when I was back in the day when I was a youngin', going to the mall back in the lovely town of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Every once in a while, we had a little paper. You saved up a little paper. You go to a little spot in the mall called Just Silver. And Just Silver had all the little bling bling, all the working class bling, that we can get, our little chains and rings and bracelets and whatnot. You'd have gave me a $1,200 check back then. Woo, boy. I'd have came out stunting. I'd have had 4 chains and 3 watches and a couple bracelets, probably a pinky ring. So maybe I'm going to go do that. I'm just going to get my stimulus swag on. We'll see.
There you go. That's certainly an option for a stimulus check.
Or realistically, or more realistically, as a man with a wife and 4 kids, I'm going to end up buying like pull-ups or something. I don't know.
That's fair.
Pull-ups and paint and primer or something. That's going to be my life. So, but those of you that are single, ready to mingle and all that stuff, I hope y'all enjoy your stimulus money and the rest of us.
Have fun with that $1,200. If you I don't know. If you in Iowa, I'm sure that's a lot of money. If you in California,
shots fired at
half your rent. I don't know.
No, that's real.
That is interesting how they didn't factor in the cost of living, but that's a whole nother conversation. Let me tell you something else about the COVID-19. Sure. We're still stuck at home. Stay at home. Well, that's a good question.
Oh, yeah.
Where are we at? This is the online studio, but the stay home social distancing protocol has been extended to April 30th. If you didn't hear that news, which you should have heard that news. But the talk is it could be much longer. Kellen, how do you feel about being locked in the house for another 2 months?
Well, assuming my wife is listening, I love it. It's awesome. It's the best thing ever. I would love for this to extend forever. Assuming she's not listening, I'm going a little crazy. We'll talk. So this whole thing is interesting. If you'd have told somebody, pick a random individual 6 months ago and say, hey, look, you're going to be able to work from home, for 4 months or whatever. And most likely your expectations of output are going to be lower and it's just going to be overall fairly chill. And you're not going to have to get up and go anywhere, go to the office, whatever. Most people be like, okay, that's cool. But if you told them, hey, but your entire family is going to be there with you, or if you're single, but everybody else is going to be at home too. So can't nobody come see you or you can't go see anybody else. It'd have been a little bit different. And so I think right now there's elements that are awesome, being able to get up and I don't have to go through traffic and go to work and all that. And I'm just home all the time. On one level, it's awesome. But on another level, it's a little much because we are always together. And I got 4 kids here and a wife. And we're just always around each other. And I never realized how little I was actually around my family and actually how freeing that was on some level because it is hard being around people all the time. It just is. So I don't know. We're going to keep on grinding and rolling to the 30th, man. But, I'm going a little nuts here.
So Kellen's family man title is being tested, but it's been, At first, I was hyped for it because I'm super introverted, so I can stay in the crib for a good minute and get stuff done and read and all that stuff. But I think I've hit my limit because as you see on this screen, if you're on YouTube, on this screen, what you see, this is literally where I sit all day. Because I work here, I do everything right here. So I'm kind of sick of this seat. I'm kind of sick of this room. So,
it gets old.
It even hits an introvert.
And that's the other thing too, is just the not being able to go out thing, it's if we were working from home, but still could go do, but I'll leave the house, don't get me wrong. Every once in a while, I just got to go for a drive and get up out of here. Speaking of, I went for a drive out the other day. I went down to the city. I live a little north of Chicago. I went to the city. I was on the north side. and just to get out. And every person in the north side of Chicago was out and about, just on the streets. There wasn't a lot of traffic. Traffic was light, but they was all on the street. Everybody walking their dog. They was walking their babies. They was walking pet turtles, like whatever they had. They was just outside, just out and about, lottie-dottie dying. And I'm like, yo, why? And it was a Sunday afternoon. Wasn't no festival going on. Wasn't no Cubs game or nothing like that. They just out on the streets. So I feel like this is the exact opposite of social distancing, because y'all just all out here rubbing elbows. It was a bit wild to me, but I get it, because we cooped up. Like, we cooped up. Tough. I can't just go, hey babe, let's go, get a bite to eat it, for dinner or whatever. Or even if you go to the store, it's like, it's just, you there and you out, you there and you out. You there on a mission. You can't just go to the mall and wander around. Not that that's even something I do, but it's just, you can't go to nobody's house. You can't go see your people. Like, it's a bit much, So I think it's that whole level of isolation that's starting to get to me and getting other folks too, I'm sure.
No, it's been real wild. I went to the grocery store just today. It's the first time I've been out the house in a good minute. But it was wild there, man. Everybody in masks, got little marks on the ground. You got to stand 6 feet apart. You only let a certain number of people into the store, man. So America ain't experienced nothing like this in some generations, for sure.
No, I definitely feel like something out of science fiction novel, or I saw a lot of people talking about that movie Contagion. That came out some years ago. I always loved that movie, but I did go rewatch it like a couple weeks ago, and I was like, yo, this really is, like, on a lot of levels, it really does seem like what we're going through. Obviously, there's some differences, but it's kind of scary how close to the market hit. It's wild out here, man. So, what else? Anything else going on around here, Will, before we move on? I noticed, so you had a note about the unemployment records. People are applying for unemployment at record levels, and it is actually getting a little scary around here.
We can edit that out. Don't worry.
No, keep it in. I for those listening, a 4-year-old just burst into the room, looked around, dropped his pull-up, and walked into the bathroom that is adjacent and is utilizing the restroom to my left. So, it's a wild, wild world that we live in. If we gonna keep that in, well, maybe not. If we keep it in, you're hearing this. If Will trumps me on it, you'll never know.
We'll keep it in. It's the quarantine edition where you hear the whole family.
Oh, and now both twins are in. All right, little man, go play. Both of y'all, go yonder. Yeah. So anyway, so unemployment, the non-existent now unemployment lines are around the block, and with a lot of people not only losing their jobs, but also there's a lot of jobs that are going on furlough. As you guys know, I'm not telling you you don't know, but it's hitting that unemployment hard, and I'd always wonder how this is going to have long-lasting effects on the economy. I mean, I'm sure you can watch CNBC or something if you want to know more on that, but just from a regular guy perspective, I'm a little nervous about how these things are going to hit. If they're going to affect our taxes, and who knows what it's going to look like a year from now when maybe life has got to quote unquote normal, but we're still going to see the effects of this in other areas. So.
No, that's true. It could be a whole new world coming out this mess, man. So, but hey, let me give you something lighter.
Huh?
There you go, man.
What?
You need a record label first.
Oh, yeah.
Second,
Kingdom Dreamer. Let's go.
Dude, we could. Record label coming soon. Let me give you a little bit of lighter news. Officially, they announced there will be an NFL 2K football video game reportedly coming to the market in 2021. Now, if you play video games, this is good because Madden sucks and they need competition. Got any thoughts?
Yeah. Do I have any thoughts? I don't even know, because I don't really play games like that anymore. I used to be a quote unquote gamer, as they say, and I had to give it up because that narcotic was starting to get to me. So I had to step away. Or once in a while, I pick the sticks back up to play one of my kids, and even though I only play like once every 6 months, I'll still be giving them the business. So just like riding a bike, that talent don't go away. So NFL 2K coming out, I'm sure it'll be interesting. If they're bringing something new out, I'm sure it has to be really good. Otherwise, they wouldn't waste their time, because Madden's been out. How long has Madden been going? I remember like Madden 93 and 94, I think. So it's been going at least,
it's been a few
20
decades.
20 plus years. So if you trying to come at the king, they best not miss, is all I got to say. Although 2K was out, a while back, or NFL 2K was out.
It was. EA's sleeping though because they ain't got competition. And 2K took out NBA Live. I'm ready to see it smack Madden too. But
you remember the old NBA Live games where the players' legs ain't move and they were just skating around around the court,
just like slide. Yep,
just slide. Yeah,
those were good games, man. Those were good games. I remember breaking all records on those games, man. But
winning games 237-13 and whatnot.
Exactly. Getting 80 steals with your point guard and dropping 88 points.
Because you turn fouls off and you just hacking.
Exactly. Yeah. You just smashing that steal button. I remember I had like I think I had Andre Miller or something like that. I broke all the steal records and everything with him. Just like
Andre Miller has to be the most random video game player ever because his whole game was based on he was an old man that posted up as a point guard. Anyways, those that don't know basketball don't know. But why would you ever play with Andre Miller in a video game?
Because he was on the Nuggets for a while.
And put him on the bench. Andre Miller is the worst video game point guard I can think of. Anyway, like I said,
he became the best because I broke the steals. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, okay. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to my childhood me for breaking that record. Anyway, let's get a little bit into the nitty-gritty before we jump into some other cool stuff.
And I think I want to talk this morning.
What do you think? So we talk about all this news. Most of it's COVID-19. Because it's wild out here, and this is a really crazy season. But what do you think, Kellen, we should learn in this quarantine at home COVID-19 season? What do you think, man? Drop some knowledge on the people.
So, I'm like, should we go deep or should we stay shallow, right? One or the other. I think – so there's a couple elements. So we're going to start like this whole family thing, right? Now, again, some of my people, some are single. They at the crib. They kind of by themselves right now, right? But this whole quarantine element, it should tell us a lot about family and kind of how we operate and how we move in a family unit. Like, I'll be honest, I'm learning the value of distance, right? Like, and I'm not even trying to joke on that. Like, the fact that I get up and leave my house every day. And then I come back means the world drains you and whatnot, but it's just a different level of engagement with your family when you're only together really for like 4 waking hours out of the day versus 24. So when I say the value of distance, what I mean is we're together all the time. And I realize that sometimes we need to be separate. Sometimes we got to give each other some space, right? So like I said, every once in a while I go for a drive. Every once in a while, my wife will go off in the room and, she's going to watch her show or whatever, right? And it's just like we need a little bit of space. The same for all the kids, Everybody needs a little bit of space and distance to be able to, like, recharge their batteries. But at the same time, it's really valuable being able to be together during this time. And, I feel like, look, I'm getting to know my kids better than I ever have because I'm just with them more. And so I think whenever all of this is quote unquote over, there will be a sense of loss there. Being with my little ones every day, it's stressful, but it's also a blessing. And, it will be hard to go back to, okay, I'm leaving you in somebody else's care for, 7, 8, 9 hours throughout the day while I go, make the bacon. So that's just one element. What you think about that, Will?
No, that's real. I was going to say my learning has been the opposite, but it is true. I didn't think about that. I literally haven't missed a moment of my child being born because he was born right before COVID-19 dropped on us. So, like, I've been here literally for every minute of that dude's life, which is a blessing. I guess I haven't been away to see it now. But I was thinking the opposite way. As an introvert, I've always wanted to be like, shut up and just do what I want to do. I want to read, I want to create, I want to do these things, but I don't want people distractions. But, man, like, it just shows me how much, like, I need the community out there that, I withdraw from so much in normal day life because, man, I've been locked up in here so much. I got to just, like, yell out the window to a neighbor just to get a little bit of something happening. Yeah. But for real, I think it's teaching me the need to build those tighter-knit communities and to, not – my tendency, right, would be to come home from work. And even if I know as a pastor, I'm supposed to be building community, doing all these things, like I just want to go in the crib and ignore everybody because that's my personality. But, man, just seeing like how much that actually refreshes my soul, even though it hasn't in this season because I've been locked up for so long. So just it's bringing balance back to my life. So it's been good.
Well, I mean, we're communal creatures. You know, we need each other and other people, even if you're an introvert, even if you don't have a ton of other people. We need people, and when that's taken away, you know, you see kind of the effects on that. Of that. It's just you know, there's something missing from your life when you're not able to really engage with other people, or and don't even necessarily have that option. So. No, I definitely agree with you.
Well, and I'd say another thing I'm learning, and this is just reflecting today, is like my tendencies are towards workaholic type stuff because I feel like I've worked way more being in quarantine because I haven't had the rhythms of breakup of day, like go to an office, do what I got to do, come back and do different type of work. But because it's like all meshed together, home and work, like I've been working way too much. So it's a tendency I'm leaning towards. I got to watch out more. That's, I think, being exposed to me being locked up in this house.
Step away from the desk, man, and go cuddle up with your boo and your youngin', and you know, House Hunters or something. You know, just gotta go chill.
That's right. I gotta change it up, man. So I'm learning. I'm learning.
Read a novel, Will. When's the last time you read a novel?
I can't.
Read something.
So actually read probably not since they made me read one in high school, but I did listen to a novel. I listened to, what was that novel that blew up? Dang it, I forget.
Fahrenheit 4.
No. Well, I did read that back in like high school. No, they just made a movie about it. The Hate You Give. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I listened to that on audiobook. I don't know if that counts, but that's the last novel I've engaged with at all. It's been a minute.
Were you giving hate? Were you being a hater? Terrible joke.
Wow.
All right, moving on. No, so look, another thing that has kind of been on my mind is this idea of us being kind of overly entertained, right? So at the start of the year, one of my New Year's or my 2020 goals was to spend less time being entertained, you know, more time either being silent or creating or whatever the case may be. And what I meant was even not just, you know, stuff like watching TV or whatever, but even as I drive to work, I'll be listening to a podcast or, you know, I'll listen to new music or whatever, right? When I come home, if I had nothing going on, if there was nobody talking to me or whatever, like I would have some level of entertainment going on either in my ears or on a screen. Like I realized my life was just filled with input, you know, just always something being inputted. Even when I'm writing and things like that, I'll still be listening to something or watching something and, you know, kind of in the background. And I wanted to kind of disengage from that a little bit. Now I was doing a decent job, but since this thing has started, like immediately once the whole idea of quarantining started happening, I would come across these, you know, articles and things of that nature of people talking about, oh, well, here's what to do during quarantine. Here's how to keep yourself entertained, and talking about Netflix and Hulu and all, like, here's some shows to catch up on and binge and whatever. And on a level, I've definitely gotten caught up in that. You know, we're working from home, work is, depending on your job, work is slower. So whether you might be listening to something while you work or watching something while you work, and it's just, and you, as you said, you're home, and so those lines kind of get blurred. It's not like normally I come home, maybe I get home at 6:00 and I'm preparing dinner for the kids and doing this, that, and other. I don't sit down to chill until like 7:38. Now it's just kind of all blended in. So I'm just realizing I'm spending all day just with these inputs and these TV shows and I'm saying podcasts, but I want y'all to keep listening to podcasts. Podcasts is entertainment. This is education.
Yep.
So please
education.
do so. But yeah, but it's just, are we finally getting to the point as a society where we are becoming oversaturated with entertainment and input?
I mean, that's true though. We're a consumer culture, not just in buying material goods, but we just consume a lot of stuff, right? Constantly. Yeah. That's what it is. Interesting thought, because there's a lot of people I talk to that just cannot sit in silence. And it's interesting.
That's me.
Yeah. It was like just thinking about like a whole society that never sits in silence, and what we would find if we got into the silence, what we discover about ourselves, about each other, if we just like sat silent for a period of time.
Let me see. I wonder why that is. Like, because there, as you know, silence is important, right? We think about when you're in school, all of these philosophers and whatnot that you study. Like that, those people sit around and think about things, right? Like, like you have to, the way we think about like morals and ethics. I mean, as us as Christians, we get ours from the Bible, but even beyond, you know, kind of the Bible says there's other elements of life where people have spent just time and energy and effort just thinking about these things, mulling over things in their mind. And when you're constantly like bombarding your brain with music or other sensory, or, you know, I don't know how to necessarily say that, but there's different sensory elements coming in all the time.
Right.
When do you have time to just really sit and figure things out? And I'm wondering, like, I don't know, maybe it's because we're in modern times. Like, I know me, I've told my wife this a few times, other people, like, I didn't live on a street that wasn't on a bus route, or like, better way to put this, I lived across the street from a bus route or on the same side of the street as a bus stop my entire life until I was 24, I think. So, actually, no, not even 24. It was 26. It was after I got married and we moved. But like, I mean, before that, like every place I've lived has been like in an urban environment. You know what I'm saying? And on a street that can be considered busy. You know, some busier than others. But it's like, that's kind of what it was. And so my brain is just used to input all the time. And so when I'm sitting in silence, it's weird for me. When there's no noise, it's loud, if that makes sense. So I don't know what it is, man, but yeah, we got to get to the point where we can kind of sit and be, you know, and be alone with our thoughts, and you know, get deep with it and be alone with our thoughts and be able to connect with the Most High and things like that. So
no, that's true. I mean, there is something like, there's personality differences, so it might be easier for some others, but there is a spiritual discipline of silence that maybe, you know, there's opportunity in quarantine to figure that out. But I don't know, with 20 streaming services, it's tough. It is wild. I mean, streaming services, but it's tough.
Yeah, and we're talking, and they talk like everywhere you look, it's like, oh, this is an excellent TV show, excellent movie. You got to watch all of this. You got to catch all of this up. And like, look, I'm not about to act like I'm a Quaker out here. You know, I'm just like, I engage in entertainment and culture and TV and things of that nature. And it's like, oh, this is dope. Like, I've gotten multiple recommendations just in this past week of TV shows I should be watching from friends of mine. Just, oh, you should check out this, you should check out that, you should peep this, you should peep that. Sure, before we started recording, I was on Will about watching Tiger King. So I'm doing it too.
That's true. But
we got to find a balance.
It's the same thing. It's like music's the same thing. That's why I find myself, like, it used to be back in the day, I had to actually go buy the album, right? So I had a limited consumption. But now you just pay a monthly fee and have unlimited music. You have to check out every album or you're not relevant, or things like that. Like, there's just so much consumption coming in. But it is what it is. Over entertained.
Hey, think about it. You know, shoot us an email or, you know, something. Let us know what you think, and maybe we'll read it on the next episode. Yeah,
tweet at us.
Tweet at us. Yeah, tweet at us. DM us. Whatever it happens to be. You know, let us know what you think if you have thoughts. You know. But so before we move on, did want to just let you guys know about a brand new sponsor of ours, because you know we're doing it big. We're doing it big out here. We got sponsors, and not just, you know, Jimmy's Cupcakes down the street or Al's Furniture. You know, we got real life sponsors.
Trying to get Jimmy's, though. We've been trying to get Jimmy's for the longest.
Jimmy ain't been returning our calls, so we're irritated with Jimmy. But we got real life sponsors, and our new sponsor is Stitcher Premium. This ain't just regular Stitcher. We talk about Stitcher Premium. So what is Stitcher Premium? You might be asking. Well, Stitcher Premium is a premium subscription service to Stitcher that includes bonus episodes and exclusive shows from hit podcast hosts, early access to popular podcasts, and ad-free shows. So, hey, if you like comedy, there's exclusive archives and episodes from Comedy Bang Bang, WTF with Mark Maron, and How Did This Get Made, one of my favorite podcasts, by the way. If you like true crime, you got things, exclusive archives and episodes from Criminology, or bonus episodes from True Crime Garage, or even ad-free episodes from My Favorite Murder or Marvel's Wolverine Plus. So even pop culture, that's Getting Curious with Jonathan Ness, a whole bunch of stuff, right? So if you like it, check it out. Stitcher Premium only costs $4.99 a month or $34.99 a year. So get that by using our code. We got an exclusive code. We're doing it big time. It's Wild World, and you get Stitcher Premium free for 30 days. So again, that code is Wild World, not Wild Wild World, just Wild World,
Just
one wild, for 30 days for free. So go ahead and check that out. Again, it will be worth your money, and you're also helping us out there. So check out Stitcher Premium, and we hope to see you there.
Bang. So with that, we're going to jump into what's going to take a bulk of our podcast out there for the regular listeners is we want to spend some time to talk about the massive spike that we've seen in Asian American hate crimes with connection to COVID-19. We saw just a few weeks ago, there was within a 2-week period, over 750 reported that were violent crimes, not just like, regular, hey, I hate you type stuff, but violent crimes against Asian Americans in connection to COVID-19 and connecting back to China, including the United States president calling it the China flu and all sorts of mess has been happening. But we have opportunity a little bit later in this podcast to interview Ray Chang, Michelle Reyes, who were the founding leader drafters of a statement against Asian American, anti-Asian American racism in connection to COVID-19. And they also started the Asian American Christian Collaborative at the same time to begin these conversations. But Kellen, what are your initial responses to things you've seen just kind of happening in this season?
Yeah, most definitely. So just forewarning everybody, this is why we have this podcast, because we like to talk about things that are going on here in this wild, wild world. And we also like to talk about them from our different and at times unique perspectives, right? Yep. And so, my initial reaction once I started learning about this was, obviously like, this is terrible. Like, this is ridiculous. Reading stories about people yelling racial slurs at Asian folks as they're walking down the street or just minding their business at stores, even attacks and all sorts of nonsense. And, you sigh and you roll your eyes and say, we're always reminded how dumb, idiotic, xenophobic, and racist people just actually can be, especially when they're scared. And we see it from time and time again, right? And it hits all sorts of different groups in America. And the reality is, if you are not white Anglo-Saxon with your roots in, England and and whatnot, your people group has got it at some point here in this country. And so, Will, my initial reaction was just, here we go again. And my initial reaction was, sadness that folks are dealing with this. So what was your initial reaction, Will? I know you come from a more unique situation than I am.
Yeah, I guess same thing. Yeah, pastoring a Chinese church in this season, it hit directly at home to people I'm supposed to be leading and shepherding. But it is interesting. We've been doing this podcast for a couple of years now, and it seems like very regularly there's things that happen that really expose the heart of particularly the United States, but really globally, right? Of what narratives life has been built on around white supremacy in America. Like just tons of things, minor things happen that always expose this deep, sinful heart of a nation. And this, again, is another form of that, right? So I think it causes, unfortunately, it's not surprising. And it should cause us to, particularly for those who have been denying, systematic racism and the larger narratives at play. Like, it seems it hits everybody. It just depends on what happens in history, right? And you can't escape those narratives, even for those who try to assimilate into white culture. At the end of the day, when something happens, you'll be exposed. Like in this case, something happens in China, even if you've fully assimilated into white culture of America, right? It's going to end up exposing the deep-seated narrative that white supremacy is top. So it's unfortunately not surprising, and it seems to just be regular in our conversation, even if we try to avoid it.
Even in our lifetime, Will, like in our even adult lifetime, we've seen the attacks on Middle Eastern folks after 9/11. We've seen, obviously, recently the attacks on Hispanic people, and particularly people of Mexican descent, over the last few years, with, with these border issues. So it happens time and time again. And now here's the part that that is interesting and intriguing to me, and where, my kind of dual, I won't say dual loyalties, but where I find myself having multiple thoughts about things, based on who I am. I'm a young Black Christian man, right? So as we talked about, we're seeing all these things hitting all these different groups. And my initial, response when I saw everything that was going on is, just, yeah, that sucks. It is terrible, right? And then I started seeing different responses, and I started seeing a lot of talk about, people of color and people banding together and these sorts of things. And I started, seeing things where there was some different, like Black leaders, like local community leaders, encouraging people to go out and like support Asian businesses and things of that nature. And I'll be honest, part of me said, okay, like maybe let's hold up a little bit, and not hold up a little bit because, I don't want these people or businesses to be supported or whatever. But I always have a slight issue when I see, as a Black man, when I start seeing people starting using terms like people of color and minorities and things of that nature. Because again, as a Black man, there is a strong reality that Black people have been kind of pushed to another side, right? So we're all people of color and all minorities when it's beneficial and useful for other minorities to align themselves with. However, every single minority in America, well, let me not say every, because, I guess anybody that's not white is a minority. So there might be somebody from a little tiny island in the Pacific like, wait a minute, you ain't talking about us. But you know what I mean? The larger minorities in the country, there are elements of anti-Black racism prevalent amongst all of them, right? Amongst Hispanic culture, amongst Asian culture. I don't know so much about Native American, but just in general, anti-Black racism is prevalent and it's there. People have experienced it, and we have history. And in particular, there has definitely been a history of anti-Black racism in the Asian, and I'll just stick even to America, because there's a lot going on outside of America, but in the Asian American, I don't want to say culture, but Asian American and Black relations, let me put it that way, because I'm speaking in generalities, obviously.
Right.
There is a long history of anti-Blackness that has been going on there. And so I started thinking like, okay, it's interesting, again, speaking in generalities, and I'm not going to keep saying that to couch my statements, because I think y'all can follow me, and if you can't, well, we'll figure it out. But I'm just like, I find it interesting that now the Asian community is like, hey, we all need to band together. We're all minorities. We're all this. We're all people of color. When in general, like, yeah, no, not really. You know what I mean? Like, there's definitely not been that whole attitude of we're all people of color. We're all minorities. Let's all band together as a whole. During my lifetime, at least, that has definitely not been the case. And I know some of this are things that you get into with the interview, and when I was reading the statement on from the Asian American Christian Collaborative, I was thinking these things. The Black community has really suffered in a lot of ways at the hands of the Asian community. Like, just some examples, right? And again, these are all individual situations, but the murder of Latasha Harlins in LA helped spark the LA riots. Latasha Harlins was a 15-year-old Black girl that was killed by a middle-aged Asian shop owner, right? Over an argument over orange juice, Asian woman. She was Korean, I believe. Let me not say Asian. Yeah. Just recently, something that caught my attention from a couple years ago was a gentleman by the name of Akai Gurley. If you remember that name, he was a man that was killed in New York City. He was killed by a New York police officer named Peter Liang. Peter Liang was actually convicted of his death. I don't think he was charged with murder. I believe it was manslaughter. But why I'm bringing this up is because there were protests all over New York by the Chinese American and Asian community about the fact that Peter Liang was being brought to justice for the killing of this Black man. And the sentiment was essentially, well, obviously I'm summarizing, and I apologize for putting words in people's mouths, but the community essentially had a problem with the fact that this Asian man was being held accountable for the murder of this Black man when white people weren't. So this Black man had been killed as we know, this has been happening all over the place by police. And finally, a police officer is brought to justice, but essentially was like, hey, why are you convicting one of ours, right? And so that was an issue. And we see things like this happen from time to time. And obviously these are big national things, but even just culturally, like at least when I was growing up, and yeah, this is an anecdote, like there was elements of, oh, you can't talk to an Asian girl, because her people definitely ain't gonna want to see you there if you black, right? They don't want their daughters dating black men. There's elements of elitism that we've experienced from Asian culture. Like there are areas even around here where like there are really wealthy areas that are majority white, and for the most part, the only minorities present are Asian American, right? And so as a black person, I'm like, these are spaces like Asian and white are they're not intertwined, right? Because we understand and respect that there are different cultures, that the Asian culture and Asian American culture is very rich. And we do have a lot of respect for it. But in terms of our ability to kind of be in that space, it has been pushed away. And on top of that, there's even this economic element where in a lot of black neighborhoods, there's a lot of businesses owned by Asian folks, right? Whether it's whether we're talking liquor stores, gas stations, beauty supply in particular. Like beauty is if you are not black and you're not in the black community, like the beauty supply store is a must in every black community, right? Because there are black hair care products that are specific to our hair and our hair texture, even skin, and all sorts of stuff that is very important that aren't always sold in the Targets and the Walmarts of the world. So we got to go to the beauty supply store. Almost all of those beauty supply stores are owned by Asian people. And there's even been stories out there recently about black people trying to get into that space and own their own beauty supply. Like there was a story about two young black women in their early 20s I've been to looking at previously who had opened a beauty supply store. And according to them, they were being froze out by their vendors because other beauty supply owners who were Asian were essentially telling vendors not to sell to them. And they wouldn't purchase from it anymore. Now, this was a year or two ago. I haven't followed back up on that story. So, there's two sides to every story. But we see things like this happen on a regular basis, right? And so it's not like, there's black Asian beef necessarily, but it's definitely interesting to me when all of a sudden I see Asian American community as a whole now looking to other minorities and say, hey, no, we're all together. We're one. It's like, yeah, no, that hasn't really been our experience here. So now that you guys are catching the brunt end of it, now you want the solidarity that we haven't received from you. Like as a whole, all these years, again, as a black, we're not in the oppression Olympics here, but black people have been catching on the chin in this country for years and years and years. And Asian people in general are the minority that is the most economically well off in this country. And it's not like there's a long history of, an Asian African American alliance. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
all of these things are swirling through my head as I'm thinking about what's going on right now and these calls for unity that are going on now. And so I have questions. The black side of me is a little apprehensive about all of that, Will.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an important conversation to have, a needed conversation to have. And obviously I personally can't say anything to it as a white man in America, but I do think it.
Tell me what to think, Will.
Yeah, that's supposed to be my role, right? But I mean, I think it does drive us, or at least point to a need for us to examine the historical narratives, to see both where people groups have similar stories so we can find unison, but also to expose those places of disunity where we need reconciliation if we're actually going to move forward for justice, which is what you're exposing, right? And there's obviously historical narratives that need to be confronted, which I think is a part of this movement. It needs to be a part of anyhow, right? Is that they can't be separate. If we're gonna call for solidarity and justice, it also calls for repentance and reconciliation in places, right?
Yeah, and it's human nature. It's the most human thing in the world that, when you are confronted with something, to all of a sudden say, wait a minute, like this sucks and I need help from others that are dealing with it, when maybe in the past you've been kind of in your own bubble, right? It's, I don't want to use too many, but when you go something bad, all of a sudden, if you go through a stint of homelessness, now you care more about homeless, than if you hadn't dealt with it in the past. And so we care most often about the things that directly affect us. There was kind of viral Twitter post a couple weeks ago. This lady was saying, "Oh yeah, my dad has been a lifelong Republican. He was a staunch Trump supporter for years and years, but then he's seen how he's handled this COVID-19 thing, and because my dad is also a physician, it's just really bothering him. He's saying that he's no longer supporting Trump." And everybody else, not everybody, but a lot of people say, wait a minute, so your dad didn't mind when he was still supporting Trump when they were putting babies in cages, and he was still supporting Trump when he was saying sexist and racist things. So none of those things bothered him, but because he's an older man who is a doctor and also is potentially going to be affected by this disease, now he doesn't like how Trump's handling that, so now he's not supporting him anymore. But these other issues clearly didn't matter to him enough, right? And so, people piled on, and there's truth to that. But again, we care about the things that directly affect us unless we are made aware of these things and the importance of them by other people. And so hopefully, in my mind, this is something that makes folks aware of this, helps the Asian American community realize this. Like, look, y'all have been making a lot of money off of Black folks. Most Black neighborhoods, at least where I've been around, have Chinese food restaurants. I'm not saying that that's representative of it, but like there are Asian businesses that are making money off of Black Americans on a regular basis. On like, you talking about business plans, like this is my niche, So how are y'all contributing to these communities that you're benefiting from? Like in LA Riots, we talked about like people were going and purposefully burning down Korean businesses. Now that was terrible, shouldn't happen. Definitely feel sorry for that, but that's because people felt a very real feelings of being taken advantage of by these people that did business in their community but did not live in their community and took advantage of their community. And I don't know how much that's really changed over the past 20 years. And so I'd encourage, my Asian American brethren, and again, I'm speaking in generalities. It's not everybody individually feeling these particular ways or engaging in these things, but I'd encourage everybody to think about these things and, see, hey, what can we do? How can we bring unity? How can we kind of close that gap that has been created there? And, even as a Black man myself, I'm doing those same things. But because we have this platform, because it's Wild Wild World, because we talk about these controversial things, I have to share these thoughts. Otherwise, I'll be doing everybody a disservice.
It's true. You'd be lying. I think so. Before we jump into the interview, because I think the other really important thing that exposes that you mentioned is that our experiences don't paint the fullness of reality. And I think that's particularly important for white America that's very, very individualistic. There's no, we're not built in a collective society. So our minds are trained to what I experience and what I see is what reality is. And anything else outside of that, you're probably lying. So I think
you must have been arguing with people online and back in your day.
I try to stay out them comment sections now. But seriously though, that may be like an extreme way of saying it, but the need to recognize that just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it's not reality, and being able to open our eyes to see the fullness of that.
That's actually a cultural thing. I mean, there's studies out there that show that white Americans are way more likely to view the world from an individualistic standpoint because you haven't had to answer for a group of people. And my guess is Asian Americans are dealing with that in some similar way. Now, obviously, Asian Americans have it's different because depending on what your background is, there's this whole cultural element here, and that's slightly different, right? So I know it's not the same, but my guess is many folks have kind of have lived that same way. Like, well, I haven't experienced X, Y, and Z, so it's not a problem. And when you're also oftentimes the majority, not just in your in your neighborhood, but in society, you don't have to think about or come to grips with or wrestle with your cultural identity, like you do if you're a minority. Yeah, you think about things from an individualistic point of view. So, like, arguing people online all the time, well, I haven't seen this, and well, the Black person I knew did this, and it's like, okay, but like you said, it's not about your micro experience; it's about the macro. Out there in the world. So
Yeah, and that's why many white Christians have trouble understanding social justice issues, even if it's clearly biblical, is
Hmm.
because they live through such an individualistic lens. And I think, particularly in America, because white culture it's built on white supremacy, anybody who's tried to really assimilate to American culture has bits of that individualism in them that can cause them to think those ways, even if you're not white. So I think that
Hmm.
experience is there, but obviously it's very strong in white America. But
Yeah,
uh,
and even that assimilation thing is interesting because the opportunity to try to assimilate is unique to kind of first and second generation immigrants because you still have your culture, your background, whether you
mm,
came from Uzbekistan or whatever, that's still inside of you. Is right. You're
yeah,
familiar with it. You're aware of it. So you can feel like you can assimilate to American culture, but you don't necessarily lose your heritage because it's there. When you like as a Black American, we have to fight, scrap, and claw to kind of
to
hold on to that background which was taken from us, and so we're kind of on some level creating it. Like we have our American background, but even going like that African, like we don't have that. We don't have my grandmother telling me stories about our home village. Like that's just not there for us. So that assimilation point is even a level of privilege on some level. Actually, I don't want to call it privilege. I think that's the wrong term, but it's
yeah,
I don't know. It's interesting. But
no,
we're just
yeah,
talking through
maybe
it.
not
We
privileged,
can
but you're right
so
though.
yeah,
Certainly, the way immigration works and the narrative, the historical narratives behind that, really
yeah,
affect how that actually works. Opportunities to do that. But
yeah.
with that, what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the interview, but then Kellen and I are actually going to come back for a Patreon exclusive after this and have our response to the interview, talk a little bit more about some things going on with COVID-19. So if you're not a Patreon supporter, you can always jump on there and get that patreon.com/Kingdom Dreamers. Enjoy
Mhm.
any tier and you'll have all the exclusive Patreon episodes. So you'll get the response to that. But
Hey, remember that the Patreon it goes to help what we do. If you enjoy,
yeah,
you appreciate it. It is support, and we can really use it. We really appreciate those of you that jump on to show your love and support via Patreon. And so we're trying to give y'all some things that are exclusive only to you, because we want to make sure that you understand that we appreciate that support and there's value to your support as well.
that's true. We love to create, but it's not free, so we need your support and we want to give more to you. So, with that, without further ado, we're going to jump into the special interview with Raymond, Chang, and Michelle Reyes about the Asian American Christian Collaborative and their statement on COVID-19 and anti-Asian racism. So, I want to welcome Ray, Chang, and Michelle Reyes to the Wild Wild World podcast, part of the Kingdom Dreamer movement. Ray and Michelle are the lead drafters of a legit super all-star stack team behind the statements on anti-Asian racism in the time of COVID-19, which personally I'm really excited about the momentum I've seen. It's getting a lot of shares online. It's been reported on by multiple news sources, Christianity Today, Religious News Service, etc. Excited to be a part of this, to see what you all are doing and partner with you. But first, before we jump into the nitty gritty of this, I want the Wild Wild World audience to know who you guys are. Who is Ray and Michelle? So first, I want to start with Michelle because I don't know Michelle that well. So who is Michelle Reyes?
Oh man. Well, thank you so much for having us on. Thrilled to be here. So I am a second generation Indian American woman. If I was to tell you my byline, it would be church planter, pastor's wife, author, activist, and mom. I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Quite a stack.
So I actually started in the academy. So I have a PhD in 18th century German literature, and helped get the German program up and running at Moody Bible Institute and taught in Chicago for a while. And my focus was on folklore and female storytelling, narrative justice, which focuses a lot on just passing the mic from those in power to those who are on the margins. And now that I'm in full-time vocational ministry, I'm taking those same ideas and applying them now to our largely immigrant community. And so my husband and I, we planted a church in 2014 called Hope Community Church in East Austin, which is historically low-income disadvantaged communities with people of color. So our church is minority-led, multicultural, intentionally so. And we're doing a lot just on the ground in terms of just elevating the voices of the marginalized and seeking justice in all sorts of ways for the people in our community. So doing that, currently also writing a book for Zondervan on cross-cultural relationships. And then I'm also the local CCDA Austin networker. So
Okay.
just keeping busy.
Yeah, you definitely keep him busy. That's cool. So when's the book come out you're talking about?
The book, as of now, is planned for March 2021.
2021 March. All right. We're going to come back to that and make sure the audience knows. That sounds exciting. And CCDA, that's really where I was transformed as a young college student, 18, was CCDA people speaking, into my life. So that whole CCDA movement really is core to who I am. So I love to hear somebody who's really leading that effort.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And is there any connection that your church is like denominationally to, or is it independent?
We're non-denominational.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's dope though. That's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's exciting. So I want to do a whole nother interview on all those other things since you're doing so much out here. But
nice.
But Ray, man, tell us who you are. Who is Ray Chang?
Yeah, well, thanks, Will, for having us. My name is Ray. I work currently at Wheaton College, overseeing our discipleship efforts through the chaplain's office. And I'm a second-generation Korean American. Both of my parents moved here. My mom's a 1.5 generation Korean American, and then my dad's a first-generation Korean American, which basically means he came in his adulthood, and then my mom came when she was in her teens. I write. Some of you would know some of the things that I've written. I actually just got a chapter in a book approved, and so that'll be coming out sometime this year. I don't even know what the title is, but it's on preaching along the lines of race and justice. And so how do we preach on these issues? And so I think Trillia Newbell and Dan Darling from the ERLC are actually the ones that are editing the volume. I'm a pastor at heart, a preacher in aspiration, and just someone who just loves Jesus. I don't wear as many shoes as, people say that people wear hats, a lot of hats. Michelle doesn't wear many hats. She wears a lot of shoes because she's always going somewhere.
A lot of shoes. I mean, that's hard to keep up with. So I won't hold you up to Michelle's standards of shoes. So don't worry about that. But no, that's exciting to hear, Ray. And when you get the title of that book, you need to let me know so I can let the audience know. Sounds exciting, especially for preaching. I need more of that, more resources for preaching cross-culturally. So we need to make sure we're getting more of those out. So just so we're not spending too much time, let's jump right into this statement. So I want to talk about the statement on anti-Asian racism in the time of COVID-19, and also the Asian American Christian Collaborative. So first, just tell me, where did this group and statement come from? Because it appeared to me to just pop up on the internet and be like, just blow up in like 24 hours. So where did it start? How did this all happen? Either you can share. So.
Okay. So you're right. It's been a whirlwind of like 9 or 10 days. But so the conversation on all of this started on Thursday, and I believe that was March 26th. But in essence, Ray and a few other friends, basically Asian American Christians and faith leaders across the country, started talking in a conversation that began a little after midnight on Thursday, and was just sharing the shared pains and experiences of racism that we'd been experiencing. And in part it was catalyzed because somebody in that group had just that same day shared something on Facebook about anti-Asian racism and was called a snowflake for it. And so it was like all of these different things happening where like we were experiencing personally racism, trying to speak out about it, being either called a snowflake largely by fellow white friends and even white Christians, and then also trying to have conversations with fellow Christians of color, and a lot of them saying, well, do you really have the right to talk about your experiences when we've suffered so much more? And so it was like these layers, right, of of just experiencing everything that everyone else is about the coronavirus and the fear of contracting COVID-19, but then the secondary contagion of anti-Asian racism, and just seeing the helplessness that our community was experiencing, and also just the rise and escalation in physical violence, and realizing this could get a lot worse, right? Like we could see the death toll rise. We could be moving towards things like internment camps. We have to do something, and we need people to see that not only the Asian American community, we're not silent on it, but that the Asian American Christians and the church is not silent on it. So Ray and I, we took the lead in drafting the statement that Friday. By Saturday, we had a team of reviewers in place, including Helen Lee, Dr. Sung Chen Ra, Alex Jun, and Dr. Peter Chan, and some others from around the country, to review it, to help breathe life into it. Some of the peer reviewers were part of the 2013 document that was written as an open letter by Asian American Christians to the North American Evangelical Church. So we definitely wanted their involvement too. And then it officially got released on that following Tuesday. So within a span of about 4 days.
Yeah, that's wild for such an impactful statement to come together so fast and so timely too. So did the statement and the collaborative group come together basically as the same thing, or was the collaborative group already formed before the statement?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, because I think there were multiple relationships that were forming over time, and I think one of the things that we were looking for were friendships that were kind of on the same page, that wanted to adhere to a historical Christianity that's grounded and rooted in Scripture, that's deeply orthodox, and yet is relevant and speaks to issues that are important in society that are oftentimes overlooked because it's not faced by the dominant group or the dominant culture or the dominant race. And I think it's been hard for a lot of us who are in predominantly white spaces to find solidarity and connection and community. And so we've just been reaching out to one another, to connecting with one another. And it really became a galvanizing point and a great launching point to actually say, okay, you know what? Let's do something, and let's create a sustained effort. So we're just not a flash in the pan, but actually an organization that people can continue to come to for resources, where they can kind of hear an Asian American perspective. And of course, there are many Asian American perspectives, because Asian Americans are as vast as the countries that they're coming from, as well as the different kind of subcultures within each country that they're coming from, even ethnic groups within each country. And as best as we can, we really want to be a space where we host the voices and the perspectives of people coming from all these different tribes, nations, and tongues.
Yeah,
that's good.
Just to add to that. So the website and the organization Asian American Christian Collaborative and the statement were released all together.
Okay. Well, see, and that's something beautiful about that, is just the foresight to not make this a one-off statement, but to create something behind it to continue sustaining this talk and this dialogue. So that's exciting to hear. And first, I mean, personally, this statement means a lot to me in my personal journey, because right now I'm pastoring a Chinese church, which is massive cross-cultural, obviously, for me as a white American, very American experienced Christian, right? So this statement literally is a statement of protection for my body that I'm learning to love and to guide in the position I'm in. So it means a lot. And that was a big thing when I saw it. I was like, this is something that needed to be out. And to see that go across Asian Americans as a larger group in such diversity, to be able to bring unison in this effort. So one of the questions, I guess, personally for the church I'm in right now, it's 95% Chinese. Most of that's mainland China. What would you all say about both this statement and the current climate and moment during COVID-19 to a church that is a Chinese church?
Well, I think, one, we hope that it's an encouragement to know that there are other people across the country, other Christians that are actually speaking up on issues of sin and righteousness and justice. We really want the church to be the ones that pursue holiness on these matters. And we are concerned that we're not, because there needs to be a whole counter formation to the defunct formation that has taken place within the evangelical and even broader Western North American church on matters of race, namely in that there's this massive avoidance, this villainization, and this unwillingness to actually address the issues that people within their own congregations often are bringing up. And so for your church, it's unique because the majority of them will find comfort and confidence and support with one another. But we hope that they are seen by a broader group of people outside of their own context, outside of your context, and then also use this because, like, people aren't, unless you're a cult, you're not really limited to just the people within the four walls of your church. And so that they'll use their own communities and friendships to share to share kind of the statement, and to have people learn from it, to take it into their workplaces, to help people get educated there, to inform, to be more informed on the issues that are really impacting our community. And of course, we're also mindful that there are other issues that we need to address, but this is a pretty major one that we're facing right now, and we want to make sure that that's highlighted.
No, that's helpful. I find that at least in my Chinese church context, there's quite a mix in how to respond to both just social justice issues in broad spectrum, but this issue in particular of anti-Asian racism during the season of COVID-19, because the experience of COVID-19 hit our body very early. End of January, we had members in Wuhan, and that was the fear of that came across very, very quick, and we had to cancel stuff very, very early. So, but the response has been either, people want to stand up for that, but then there's also a fear, right, that if I stand up against these things, I will face more backlash from the broader American community. So I do believe a statement like this allows for a unity across these boards to give confidence that, no, there needs to be a standing up together against this. This is injustice. And it begins to give a new language for social justice at large, which has not been, at least in my current body, something that's been talked about too much. So we had several members from the church sign a statement as well. So it's exciting to see that movement. But shifting to another lane, similarly with this statement in this cultural moment, what would you say to white churches and white Christians during this cultural moment?
Yeah, I think as soon as you start talking about things like racism, like this becomes a justice conversation, right? And I know that particularly within evangelical circles, it's hard at times to talk about justice, and largely because it becomes this very partisan thing, or you associate justice with certain camps or speakers. But like beyond that, I think there is this very narrow understanding of justice as punishment, right? It's the conversation focuses on law and order. Who has transgressed which law and what's the punishment, as opposed to holding a more robust understanding of biblical justice, which is holistic care for one's neighbor, right? And so I think you see that in the inbreaking of the new kingdom that Jesus brings, where he is, yes, sharing the good news, but he is also healing the sick and feeding the hungry, and caring for people's physical, emotional, and mental needs as much as their spiritual. And so this is also our example too, is to for us to understand that as the body, when one part hurts, we all hurt, right? And so when we talk about racism as a justice issue, this is about caring for all parts of the body, right? And before we even hope to call this out or encourage that in society, we need to be doing this well in the church, and caring for the immigrant, the marginalized, the oppressed among us. And right now, that means a lot of people, but it includes Asian Americans and Asian American Christians.
That's really helpful how you made the distinction between understanding justice just as law, judgment idea, but this holistic care for neighbor. I've found that I was using justice words a lot in a lot of church contexts, thinking of it in this holistic care for neighbor, but not thinking that most people understand this word in somewhat of a negative way, particularly in white churches, but even in the Chinese church I'm currently in, would think about this word justice in a negative way. So I think that distinction between how is justice defined biblically and seeing this big picture, that's helpful to begin to open up people's minds to what does this actually mean, this conversation. So that's helpful. Thank you so much for that, Michelle. So I guess I want to shift. You did mention something about this, Michelle, in your first response, but something Kellen and my co-host and I have been discussing when this statement came up was the response from other minorities to a cry from Asian Americans for solidarity. And I know it was also briefly touched on in some of you guys' videos I've been watching you've been coming out with, but I want you guys to give a response for our audience. Many people, particularly in the Black community, believe that the Asian American community has not only purposely distanced themselves from other minorities, but has greatly benefited from anti-Black racism in particular, right? By being positioned just in recent history as the model minority in these things that have been created in recent history, and that showing in, being one of the only minorities in certain wealthy areas of cities and these type of things. And most of our audience, as the Wild World World, is coming from these different places. What would you say, I guess, to the Black community during this time when Asian Americans are looking for solidarity, looking for empathy from other minorities? What would you say to those who don't feel they've received the same in return, right? And this is obviously broad generalizations, but these narratives control a lot of people's thoughts, right? So what would you say to them who haven't felt this in return? And also, what would you say to fellow Asian Americans concerning this narrative of history we've seen? I know that's a loaded question, but I want to hear you guys' thoughts.
Well, I'd also love to hear what Michelle has to say, but I think the first thing Asian Americans need to do is actually apologize. I think we are deeply collective. I mean, of all the people groups, Asian Americans, African Americans, and Latino Americans and Native Americans are all pretty collective groups. And so when something has happened to our people or to us, that has happened to generations before us, we still feel it. So for example, in Korean, there's a term called Han, which is a term for collective sadness. It's like there's no real way to translate it, but collective sadness is one way that you can understand what Han is, and it's something that resonates deeply with basically most Korean Americans and Koreans in Korea, because we have a shared sorrow. We understand the pain of living in a broken world together, and we have shared experiences and a shared history that inform that pain and inform that sorrow. It's far more difficult in individualism, especially in hyper-individualism, to want to even take responsibility for the conditions that you benefit from that were created by your own ancestors in the past. But, I think about even in Vietnam, how Koreans, Korean military folk. So I was born in the United States, so I'm fully American, right? So I'm Korean American, but I still feel I still feel lament when I think about the ways Korean soldiers treated Vietnamese women in the country of Vietnam during the Vietnam War, to the point where there are a whole bunch of orphans left behind after the Korean soldiers left. And I had nothing to do with it. But if I went to Vietnam, I think if there was a situation where it would be appropriate, I would want to apologize on behalf of my own people. And so I think on behalf of all Asian Americans, and not all Asian Americans would even agree that we need to apologize because they've bought into kind of the dominant way of thinking or into whiteness. I want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we haven't spoken up with you, that we haven't stood with you when we needed to, that we haven't done right by you, that we didn't kind of stand in the gap when we could have, that we didn't intervene, that we didn't bring you with us in the areas that we moved positively, and I think that there has to be some healing there, because I think the critique and the criticism towards Asian Americans is totally fair, right? And so if there are African Americans or Black brothers and sisters that are hearing this or watching this, if you have problems with Asian Americans, I understand. I don't blame you. What I would ask is that you would give some of us a chance, some of us who are trying to press into what the scriptures call us to in the pursuit of shalom and justice and righteousness, to remedy things moving forward. And that's part of the hope of the Asian American Christian Collaborative. And then I think for Asian Americans, I think we have to ask ourselves, what's the cost? What has the cost been for us to assimilate and to buy into this narrative that white is right? Because that's what we're talking about. And so many people have had to give up the rich cultural, ethnic heritage and their background in order to get approved in these spaces. But what a lot of sociologists will talk about is that we are actually never within the gated community of whiteness. We're actually just white adjacent, right? And so as soon as they want to put up another wall, they're going to do that. And that's what we're seeing with the coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic, right? A lot of Asians were like, hey, we're finally assimilated. People accept us. They can't distinguish us from other white people, even though most of the Asian Americans that we know are facing the bamboo ceiling. And Asian American women are facing what I call the glass bamboo ceiling. And I'm just like, you don't realize the impact of a racialization that you have chosen to neglect and to ignore. And so I would say we need to wake up. I think we need to wake up. We need to have a reckoning to understand the situation that we're in, to know that there are costs that come, that there's going to be no distinction between your Asian American child in 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 generations and a white child. And the only difference is going to be is that when there's something bad that happens by Asians or from Asians in Asia, in any country, your child is going to be the target of that. Your progeny is going to be the target of that, like we're seeing today.
Yeah. No, that's powerful, right? And that speaks to a lot of larger, the whole concept of having this collective sorrow. That's something that needs to be spoken to America at large, that's been trained in no collective at all, super individualistic. So that speaks to a lot, right? That's super helpful. Michelle, just want to hear any of your thoughts on this idea.
Yeah, I'd love to just share a few thoughts too. I think when we're talking about fellow people of color, we have to understand, on the one hand, that we have different histories of racism. I feel like sometimes we treat racism as like this singular cancer, and we're all trying to like fight over who has it worse. And it's like, we all have different stories of pain. It's like, we have to understand it as like we all have our own cancers in a sense, which require its own different approach and treatment. And so on the one hand, we shouldn't be comparing the history of racism for African Americans and the history of racism for Asian Americans. Like, for example, my own mom, her grandparents were taken as forced laborers from India to build the railroads through Uganda, Africa. And it just so happened that they stayed there long enough that they had families. They settled. There was an Indian village in right outside of Tororo, Uganda, where they lived, and my mom was born. And then President Idi Amin came to power in the 70s and waged a war, like a genocide against Indians in Uganda. And so my mom has like witnessed fellow Indians being slaughtered. She had to flee from her home with nothing. So, we have to kind of have a more global perspective, that we each have our own histories of pain and racism. And I carry that as her daughter, and it's different from the history of African Americans in our country, or Native Americans, or Latin Americans. But we shouldn't be trying to like create some sort of hierarchy of whose is worse or better or something like that. But then at the same time, we have to also understand, for example, like Asian Americans and African Americans, our histories are far more connected than we realize. And so I'll give you a few examples. One is at the end of the Civil War, Chinese immigrants were brought in as coolies to replace Black slaves on plantations. After Asians were allowed readmittance into the United States, 1917, that's 1917, they were banned. Fast forward civil rights era, when Asians were readmitted into the United States, the minority myth was created to pit us against African Americans. Yeah. But then at the same time, you see examples of Asian American activists standing alongside the Black Panthers too. And so like our histories are far more connected than we realize. And I think when it comes to the conversations about racism between Asian Americans and African Americans, we need to see that what impacts one of us impacts all of us. And what hurts one group hurts the other too. And so this is why there has to be a cry for solidarity across cultural and racial lines. And I think with that takes time, and you have to build trust. And you have to be in this for the long haul, and you kind of have to prove that you're more than just words, right? Like it's great to sign a statement, and we want people to sign a statement, but we also hope that's like a launching to a whole lifestyle change, right? Where people actually see their neighbors in a different light and seek to care for them. Even in our own church here in East Austin, our church works heavily alongside of fellow Black churches here in Austin, including fighting against the injustice of false incarcerations. And I don't know if you heard the news about Rodney Reed being falsely incarcerated back in the fall. But my husband stood alongside fellow Black pastors on national television pleading for his retrial. And so we have to be in that kind of justice work together to build trust with each other and show that we're in it for the long haul.
I think you're hitting something really important too that I find most ignored is this collective history. And even the creation of this model minority to pit against each other. I think that's an important truth that's not spoken in kind of our modern division that's happening on these justice fronts. So I think that's really important. And just the opportunity that we have right now to recognize that history and to come together in a time where we have an opportunity to do that, right, in crisis. So that's...
Asian Americans should not take pride in being considered model minorities. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. We're weaponized against Black and Brown and Native American communities because of that. And then what we don't realize is that we're actually put into a cage when we buy into the narrative that we can't actually be everything we actually are, that we can't be who God made us to be. We have to be what a racialized lens in society defines us as. And so what most Asian American don't realize, who have bought into the model minority myth, which is just a myth, right? It's not a reality, it's a myth, is that that when you buy into it, the benefits that you're getting from society are not actually equal to the cost of your own dignity that you're giving up, and you're basically selling for whatever benefit you're getting. The barter doesn't match up.
Yeah. And that's key history that not many are recognizing, the creation of this myth and what actual impact that has. So I think that's important for a lot of audiences, the ways, and we could talk about it forever, the ways that narratives are created and the ways that they separate us and the falsehood of those narratives, right? So that's super important, Ray. So I guess how much time we got? We ain't got too much time, but another important piece to this puzzle is something like the internet's amazing. It's powerful for making movements and for getting a statement like this to really be spread far and wide, right? Before the internet, that might not be possible, right? But one of the temptations of the internet is everybody can say, hey, that's wrong. And now I'm a justice warrior and cool. Now I go back to binging Netflix or whatever I'm doing, right? even though that's kind of a crude extreme example of it. But when there's seasons of overt racism, especially overt violent racism, it's easy for people to say, hey, that's wrong, right? And to, tweet about it or something. But it's much harder, especially for those in white culture or those who have been assimilated into white culture, to recognize the broader spectrum of racism, the ways that works in systems, the deep-seated narratives of white supremacy, particularly in the United States, but even globally. It's hard for us to see that big spectrum, and it's easy for something like a statement to become a, yes, I signed, now I'm good. So I guess what would you say are some ways to help, particularly in the church, to help the church to see the full spectrum of how racism plays itself out, particularly in the United States, but globally as well? And what are some resources maybe to helping people not go beyond just saying, yes, this is wrong, and to seeing these larger pictures and be able to find solidarity and fight for justice in those ways? I know that's a loaded question as well, but.
Yeah, and I think we have to start by talking about the church. I mentioned this earlier, but like if we as Christians aren't living this out well with, as a church, we have nothing to stand on to call that out in society. And so we have to start with the church. I wrote an article about this a little while ago at Missio Alliance, because we have Asian Americans in our congregation and because I'm Indian American. But so some of the things that we've been doing, regular prayer gatherings, now over Zoom, but regular prayer gatherings to specifically lament everything that is happening because of the coronavirus and COVID-19, to lament the racism that's ensued, to pray for God to bring a swift end to this virus, to spare people, and to also transform people's hearts and minds against anti-Asian racism. So we've been doing that. We've also, this also comes back to, if you see justice in scripture and the way that I mentioned it, right? Because we, in our statement even, we call for pastors to be condemning racism from the pulpit, right? But if you don't have a lens in which to read script or justice in scripture, you're not going to be calling it out on a regular basis. I think for a lot of minority leaders like myself and my husband and other pastors, we see it so present in so many times throughout scripture. So regularly calling out racism from the pulpit, changing the way you do discipleship in your church to also be mindful to a wider multicultural audience. So those are some ideas.
Yeah, I think for me, one of our hopes with the AACC or the Asian American Christian Collaborative is that we'll start producing resources for the church and for Christians and for non-Christians to get to know what Asian American Christians are thinking, and hopefully what the whole church is thinking, because we will be aligned with the global universal church on the major issues that we are addressing, right? Hopefully Christianity isn't so divergent that you can't tell one Christianity from another, or that you can tell one Christianity completely from another, and that you can't really, that all it is distinction. There are things that we are unified around. But beyond that, I think there's a deeper systemic issue that is constantly at play, which is that there's this deep anti-intellectualism, this unwillingness to engage with the mind and on scholarship on issues that are really pertinent to the church. And so you'll hear a lot of people talk about the evils of psychology or the evils of sociology or the evils of philosophy or the evils of any form of humanity. And when you hear them, it sounds like what they want is to go back to a time when fundamentalists were shaping the narrative and we're basically creating Pharisaical rules around what it means to be a Christian that Jesus himself would denounce, right? And we're still cleaning up a lot of the issues that were created, but from the modernist fundamentalist era, and both sides had it wrong. And so I think there's an element in which we have to engage with all scholarship, all especially grounded in Scripture, filtered through the Scripture. And as all truth is God's truth, and wherever that truth is, we ought to be searching for it. We ought to let it hit us. We ought to let it shape us. and we ought to let it form us. I think the other piece that I think we need to do is to actively engage with cultivating a disposition of humility, right? And so I don't think that if you get enough downloaded into your mind, it'll be enough. You can't think your way out of any habit. That's what Jamie Smith talks about in You Are What You Love, right? You can't think your way out of sin. You have to rely on the Holy Spirit to form you and to shape you and to liberate you from the sins. But it takes a tremendous amount of humility, a submission to God, and a willingness to submit to your neighbors in love. And that's what I think is lacking significantly, especially from the predominantly white church.
So you're preaching now, Ray. So this is exactly what the Kingdom Dreamers exist to do, is to try and create more resources to reunite righteousness and justice. Clearly, this is what the Asian American Christian Collaborative is doing. So I'm excited to see where this grows, where this takes the church. Excited to partner with you guys in any way possible to push this movement forward, to see God's kingdom expanded in this way. So I guess just as we wrap up, where can people find you on the interwebs? Michelle, we'll go with you first. Where can they find you, the things you're doing, connect with you?
Find me personally, or
you personally
American Christian
and
Collective?
Both. We'll go with both. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah. I'm on all the traditional social media platforms. You can find me at Dr. Michelle Reyes, or Michelle Ami Reyes on Instagram. If you're wanting to follow along with the stuff that our church is doing in terms of justice and ministry on the ground with the marginalized and immigrants, you can go to our website, Hope Community Church, or follow Hope Community Church on social media. Those are two big places you can find me.
And then I think if you're interested in following along with the AACC or the Asian American Christian Collaborative, you can go on. All the social media handles are the @ and then a Christ collab. And so if you go on Twitter or Instagram, that's where you can find that. And then obviously our website, which is Asian American Christian Collaborative.com or aachristiancollaborative.com. And then if you want to follow me personally, I don't have a uniform thing because my name is so kind of generic. And so that's really hard. Every time someone Googles me, they're like, oh, I find a baseball player or a scientist or a pastor or this or that. And I'm like, I get it. That's okay. But on Instagram, I'm Ray Chang 502. On Twitter, I'm Tweet Ray Chang. And then I think for the most part, if you're Googling anything that I write, it's generally under Raymond Chang.
Okay. That's exciting. And this is exciting. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes too for you podcast listeners, so you can just click on those. I have the same problem. That's why I have to use my middle initial and everything. Spell out my full government name and just make it a brand now, so you can get past the common stuff. But no, I appreciate you two being on. I'm excited for where this collaborative is going, excited for the Kingdom Dreamer community to kind of join in and hear more about that. So we'll stay connected, excited for what you all are doing.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Wild Wild World Show. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Follow us on Twitter at KingdomXDreams and learn more at KingdomDreamer.com.
We are proud to partner with Fiverr, the online marketplace for freelance services to get stuff done. If you have any business or creative needs, you need to check out Fiverr. Whether that's a logo design, website optimization, social media boost, video production, you can find it all on Fiverr. We as the Kingdom Dreamers have used them for many other services and plan to continue. Check them out at the link in our show notes.